How are we supposed to know if this is the right person for us? Marriage is a really big deal. Having kids with someone is a really big deal. And most of us don't get married thinking it's going to end in divorce, and yet 40% do. And do you know why I didn't care about that stat? Same reason you don't. Because you think, he's not talking to me. That's not going to happen to me. So let me be clear. No one thinks it's going to happen to them until it does. Yes, I'm talking to you. And if you forget everything else from this video, remember this. You can drastically improve your odds of a mutually fulfilling long-term relationship by 1, picking the right type of person, but 2, just as important, becoming the right type of person. All right, first disclaimer, quick reminder, this video has nothing to do with perfection. It has everything to do with intention and direction. None of us are perfect, and you're going to hear things today and go, oh crap, I'm not doing those things. And that's okay. I wasn't either. But what we need to realize is that what we don't know can still hurt our partner, right? Ignorance is no longer an excuse. The advice I'm talking about today drastically reduces your chances of getting into a narcissistic or self-centered relationship. It doesn't guarantee a perfect relationship with someone, but it does give us the tools to set us up for the relationship we deserve. Of course these conversations are hard. Of course it's difficult to be able to have healthy, safe conflicts, because that demands something from you, like humility and self-reflection and vulnerability and mutual respect from both people. Yes, it's hard, but I've seen what 2 people who are willing to do the hard work to make this work. All right, second disclaimer. I do not believe in the concept of the one. You can believe in fate, you can believe God brought you together, that's fine, but there is no the one. The reason why that's so dangerous is because it creates a false belief about relationships, that you just need to find the right person, and then everything else will fall into place. All your trauma just magically goes away. All your destructive coping mechanisms that you've built up for years, all the garbage you inherited from your parents' dysfunctional relationship, all of your own baggage, none of it matters anymore because we found the one, right? Wrong. I don't believe great relationships happen by accident. I believe they are built. And that includes the relationship you have with yourself, which plays a larger role in your relationships with others than you realize. And what we don't realize is it's so easy to ignore red flags and not talk about our non-negotiables and not talk about our boundaries in the beginnings of a relationship, because we are flooded with those chemicals we get at the beginning stages of love. So we cannot allow this to sabotage our long-term success. It doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy it. We absolutely should. But we have to stay level-headed and understand that they aren't always showing up as the real them, and we aren't always showing up as the real us. And we have to do both. Enjoy being in love with each other and show up and talk about what we need and not be afraid to end this relationship if things get toxic or unhealthy. All right, so having said all that, let's get into it. What are the characteristics we should be looking for if we are getting into a serious relationship with someone, or maybe even potentially marrying them? And remember, we shouldn't be expecting things from someone else if we aren't practicing them ourselves, right? Because that's called hypocrisy. And we're not hypocrites, right? One will always be safety. Without a foundation of safety, everything else crumbles. You can't have intimacy without safety. You won't be vulnerable with someone that you don't feel safe with. You can't have playfulness or friendship. You won't have any of it without safety. That means we have to have a zero tolerance policy for physical violence, aggression, dominance, controlling behavior, yelling, demeaning or belittling words, name calling. Those things don't build up. They only tear down love and trust and safety. Who you choose to be in an intimate relationship with is a really big deal. And if they've shown you with their words or actions that they aren't a safe person, I promise you, you can't change them. Stop acting like if you just talked to them different, that they would stop hurting you. That's not how love works. We can have empathy for what they went through in their childhood. We can have empathy for how difficult their life is now. But we also have to hold people accountable to hurtful or destructive behaviors. And when you can't do that, or when you don't feel safe to do that, it's always a red flag that something deeper is going on in the relationship that will eventually erode intimacy, connection, and trust. And I understand how difficult trauma bonds are to break. I understand how difficult it is to leave abusive situations, and you won't find me victim blaming. However, if we're talking about choosing a partnership with someone who is unsafe in any way, my advice would be 100% to step back, make sure you're safe, and get some professional help. Because the sad truth is, love will never be enough to sustain a relationship long term, at least not in the way today's culture has defined it. I don't care so much that you love each other, I care about how you're loving each other. That's great that you love each other. Even people who cheat most of the time say that they still love their partner. And yet those are massive betrayals that destroy relationships every day. Love doesn't make the difference. How you love does. The sad truth is, if you want a healthy marriage one day, you have to first be okay with unhealthy relationships ending. I'm not saying that's easy. I'm just saying it's necessary. Okay, number 2, how do we build a climate of safety with each other then? With consistent trust, respect, and kindness. Pick someone you can trust. Trust means that you believe you can rely on this person, that they have your back. They have your best interest in mind. They aren't going to abandon you when things get hard. They aren't going to dismiss you when you're hurt. And they aren't going to take advantage of you. Trust means if I said I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do it. And this isn't about forgetting. We all forget. But trustworthy people own that mistake. They apologize and they show you going forward through consistency that they can follow through on their word. 3, find someone who is honest and has personal integrity. Now, I know that's really hard to do because even dishonest people seem honest in the beginning, but if you give them enough time, if you hold out and try not to get too attached too quickly, people usually show you who they truly are. So just do your best and trust your intuition. Find someone who is able to be honest with you about how they're feeling and what they need. Find someone who is honest about their struggles and insecurities and mistakes. Because what I discovered in myself is those things required some self-reflection, right? I didn't know what I needed. I didn't know how I was feeling. I couldn't communicate those things because I wasn't really aware of them myself. So find someone who is at least open to learning about emotional awareness and being reflective enough to actually be honest with you. But the truth is, it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to actually be honest. And we should be encouraging that. And I'm not talking about yelling at someone and being disrespectful and then saying, hey, I was just being honest. No, that's not being kind or vulnerable. That's making excuses for your toxic behavior. What we need to do instead is take ownership of our feelings instead of blaming someone else. We can still be angry, but we shouldn't come at someone with a critical tone or escalating things by saying, you always do this, you never do that, you're so selfish. Let's stop being surprised a conversation doesn't end healthy when we didn't do anything to start it healthy. And to me, being someone that has integrity means I'm not keeping secrets from you. It means I can take personal accountability when I mess up. I don't just play the victim. I don't just blame someone else for my own shortcomings or mistakes. I don't always have to wait for you to come to me. I'm aware enough to come to you first and repair any disconnection. And just a refresher, repair means intentionally revisiting a moment of disconnection and taking responsibility for what I could have done better. And then actually apologizing, not making excuses, not saying, well, I wouldn't have had to do that if you would have just done. No, I'm actually saying, I'm sorry, that was wrong. I could have done this better. And then asking them, you need to get on the same page about a lot of things: religion, politics, sex, money, kids, in-laws, hobbies, alcohol, drugs, expectations of who's going to work and who's going to be in charge of what when it comes to the mutual chores. Do you know how many fights are about those things? All of them. We think all this stuff sounds so silly. I mean, we're in love. We don't need to think about or talk about this stuff, right? Except this is what leads to divorce or people breaking up. Once you come out of that infatuation stage, this is the kind of stuff that you'll think, how am I with someone who thinks this way? You keep having the same fights over and over again. And part of that is because you never discussed expectations around the domestic labor and the mutual chores and the mental load and how much time you're going to spend together and how much time you're going to spend apart. Because you either thought it was unnecessary or you were worried it would cause a conflict. But you didn't prevent the fight. You just delayed it. Can't change people. Unfortunately, this always takes two to work, right? So get in counseling, invite them to participate in the relationship, set boundaries around unhealthy behavior. But at the end of the day, we can't control them into loving us. They still have to choose their path, and some paths only lead to destruction. That brings us to number 6. Find someone who is at least moderately interested in growth and healing and emotional maturity. For me, I think before you get serious with someone, you should ask them, hey, if things get rocky between us, if I ever felt neglected, even if you felt like I was overreacting, would you still go to counseling with me to figure all this out? Because so many couples are in that exact situation. Doesn't matter which gender it is. I've heard both say, I'm not going to counseling because you're the one with the problem. And that hurts relationships so badly. In my opinion, we all need some counseling, especially premarital counseling. It's estimated that over 50% of us have insecure attachment. What that means is we have a destructive, maladaptive way of attaching to our partners and showing up in our relationships. And guess where it rears its ugly head the most? Our conflicts. So look at your fights, analyze them together, go through a fake fight, map it out. Where does it go wrong? Try to recorrect it before you get into the next one. Look into the why behind your reactions and mindsets. Why do I shut down? Why do I get so critical or passive aggressive? Why do I get defensive, even when I agree that you brought it up in a respectful way? Insecure attachment means that we have a subconscious fear of abandonment that manifests itself in a few different ways depending on whether you're anxiously attached, avoidant attached, or disorganized. But essentially what it boils down to is this. You weren't able to trust people in your life who were supposed to care about you and love you. And that means you won't fully trust intimate partners now. How that shows up is dependent on your attachment. Some people get very clingy, very needy, need constant reassurance that their partner isn't going to leave them. So they abandon themselves in a way in order to keep the peace in their relationship. They people please. They put your needs above their own. Because for them, that means the relationship stays safe and they won't have to feel any pain of disconnection, right? But what ends up happening is when you abandon your own boundaries and prioritize someone else above yourself, you eventually become resentful because they aren't holding up their end of the bargain. They aren't giving you safety and security and connection. They're neglecting you, which makes you fear abandonment and start conflict, which usually leads to them pulling away even harder since you're being too needy again. And when chaotic relations did, or instead of being clingy and needy, you might be more emotionally distant. You might struggle to feel feelings. You might not place much value on those. You might not get too close to people except for in the beginning because you like the initial feelings of connection. But you were taught in childhood that you couldn't really depend on anyone for anything, so you don't. And eventually, in intimate relationships, it's not long until you feel like your independence is being threatened. And you'll feel smothered by their neediness or their feelings. You'll feel like you got in too deep and they aren't going to like you when they find out who you truly are. So it's best just to end things now. And you bail. You find a reason why you have to get out of this relationship. And you do. Sometimes you come back. Other times you don't. This is half the population we're talking about. And in all those scenarios, regardless of how you show up, you're just trying to stay safe. You're just trying to protect yourself from pain. Sometimes by being hyper vigilant to any disconnection, and other times by creating disconnection so you don't feel so smothered. But neither is actually emotionally available or vulnerable or self-reflective. The solution is getting to the root cause of your fear. The solution is acknowledging that you might have some trust issues, or that you have commitment issues, or that you tend to use relationships as a way to feel whole and needed and valuable. And that's normal given what you have gone through. But remember, healing is still our responsibility. And if you find yourself asking, how come every guy I date is a narcissist? It might be time to ask, why am I so attracted to narcissists? The solution is a balance between having our own separate lives, but also feeling safe and connected together as well. And if we need more space, if we need a little bit more alone time, that's okay. We can ask for that. And if we need more closeness and intimacy, that's okay. When we're in a reciprocal relationship, we can ask for those things. And we won't be punished because we trust each other and we feel safe with each other. But be critical instead of vulnerable. It's easier to give the silent treatment instead of talk about how we're feeling, because either we don't feel safe or they have shown us that they aren't a safe place for us to do that. This is about exploring why we shut down during conflict, because we can choose not to continue to do that. But it takes healing. The solution is learning how to be emotionally available, how to discover and identify what you need in a relationship, to advocate for those needs in a respectful, kind way, to learn about your fears, and to be able to set boundaries even with those that you love. The solution is realizing what role we're playing in our own dysfunction and holding ourselves accountable. This isn't something that happens overnight. This is an ongoing journey that we're all on. Now, some people refuse to go on this journey, and their relationships always suffer. So choose someone who is at least mildly interested in walking this healing path.